talking about the differentiation between content and copywriting. Because content, see now, I love this space. This is where I started like a decade ago, and it's this umbrella that is content. Yeah. Content is anything that's consumed by an audience. Anything. Copywriting is a form of content. Awesome. However, copywriting really is intended for people to take action. It is words that make people take action. Now, I'm going to expand that to be not just words, but also symbols and media that gets people to take action, because we've got a lot of different tools at our disposal today. Mm-hmm. It's just reality. And there's a saying, I'm trying to remember it now. All copy is content, but not all content is copy.
Yes, that sounds right.
Right. So this is where my brain gymnastics kicks in. I start truly overthinking, but also just like philosophizing about this and how we approach, how do we take that foundational messaging, which we have very much intentionally designed through this market research, et cetera, mm-hmm. to be action oriented, to appeal to our audience, to really drive that message home, especially in like the closing parts of whatever we're articulating into the world. And how do we let that bleed into everything to turn your content mm-hmm. into copywriting? So you've been consistent, but did you know you're trapped in a myth? The myth of consistency, whereby you think your cadence, posting every day, doing what the gurus say, is actually checking that box, but you're missing a deeper level of consistency. That's the thing that's stopping you from actually getting what you want. And that's, of course, clients, business growth, impact. That's why we have Kristen here today. She's going to talk to us a little bit about herself, of course, why this topic matters to her, and why it absolutely matters to you. Kristen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Shauna. It's great to be here. Hello, my name is Kristen Sweeney. I am the owner and CEO of Every Little Word. We are a boutique content and communications agency, and the mission of our company is to share great ideas with the world. So that takes the form of mostly written content, but from strategy through execution, usually in collaboration with B2B organizations or organizations that are really looking to mine the expertise inside their organization. So we work very closely with marketing and communications leaders, as well as experts and executives, taking the information they know and translating it into strategies that are going to help them achieve their business goals. So Shauna, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you around consistency. You're so right that cadence, how often am I doing something, is what people think about when they think about consistency. And there is value, I believe, in being consistent, in being that reliable presence. And we can certainly talk about what that looks like. But the reason consistency is really important to me is because there is that deeper level that often ties into messaging. So not only how often are you putting yourself out there, but what are you actually trying to say? And so there's some foundational work I think we can get into that's really important to me and for your listeners that can help them have greater impact when they are checking that box of showing up every day or every week with their consistent cadence.
I think that's absolutely perfect. When you think about it, that impact that you just described really is twofold, right? It's like two sides of the same coin. Not only are you positively impacting your audience and your prospective clients, but you're also, of course, positively impacting your business, the growth that's happening behind the scenes. And your comfort in that space, your confidence in that space, being able to actually show up and execute. And you can't do that by just showing up every day. If that's all you're looking at is, well, I shared a quote today, you might not quite be as consistent as you think. So let's dive in just a little bit to actually a question that I asked you before. I think that's a really great place to start, because a lot of people will come to you, to myself, with a specific something that they want created. A website, a lead magnet, an email sequence, the list can go on. And they're wondering why it's not landing right when they're doing it themselves, or why it doesn't seem to fit into their puzzle piece that they see in their mind, right? This whole puzzle is not quite fitting. There's something that's a hiccup happening in their mind even before it's created. And when I asked you about this, I asked you about what is a struggle or a desire that someone came to you with. And from that place, you articulated something really clear. And I'd like you to share that with the audience right now, because I think it's going to sound really relatable to everyone who's joined us for this conversation.
I would be happy to, and I hope I can articulate it as clearly the second time around. But like you, I see folks coming in and often they have a specific kind of asset or a project in mind that they want to be working on. But what we often uncover is part of the reason that that work has been challenging up to this point is that they don't have the foundation. So I think about that in terms of messaging, like a messaging foundations. What are the key ways that you talk about your organization that show up no matter what you're trying to create, no matter what kind of content you're publishing across which channel? And so that is very often the place that we, it's a not quite the sell them what they want, give them what they need, but often showing somebody that actually this is the place where we need to start. And I know that can be frustrating sometimes because this is more internal work. But once you have those foundations in place, every other project you undertake from there, every other content workflow and stream you set up is going to be so much easier because you're building on a really strong foundation. And you don't have to sit in front of a blank screen being like, how do I want to position this, right? You already have those answers that have been developed for you.
100%. This is really a classic case of doing the work up front so that everything else gets easier as you go. This is something that I've been reflecting really heavily on, not only in my business, but for my clients as well, because we're always trying to rush into the next thing. We're always trying to create, to produce, to show up, because we're always told to just show up, right? And we get tripped up in the end. But if we can pause, if we can pull ourselves back and really hunker down on what is the skeleton of my business? What are the muscles and the tenue of my business? We build out the body of the business. You can put whatever clothes on that business you want. It doesn't matter if it's a website, if it's a social media post, etc. It doesn't matter because you've already got the bits and bobs to show up as a whole sturdy entity.
Yeah, 100%. And I think this is where consistency can be really important. When you think about it across channels, I think it's easier for people to latch onto. You want to be sharing the same message. When you think about people who are known for things or companies who are known for things, you don't become known for something by having 1,000 different messages. And I think particularly on social, it can feel like I need to be doing something new all the time. I don't want to be repetitive, right? Mm-hmm. So I do love like how that conversation has shifted. For example, like we use terms like repurposing now to make it sound more intentional, because in the early days of managing social media for folks, they'd kind of be like, oh, we already did that once. And it's like, of course, you want to do that 1,000 times, not the exact same post, but you want to be beating the drum of a few key messages because those are the things you want to be known for. And so having those foundations in place helps you kind of recognize like, oh yes, this is like the repetition is by design, and it allows you to really build up across, everywhere you show up, you're sending a cohesive message about who you are and who you serve.
100%. I frequently get the question or concern, something along those lines. I think you're going to relate. And I'd love to hear if you've got any of your own stories about this, where people feel like, oh no, I'm going to repeat myself, like you just said, except more than that, they're concerned about getting all of the information into one post. They want to really get, but this doesn't address that and this and that. And pump your brakes, my friend. First of all, we need to remember that a confused mind doesn't buy. First of all. Second of all, if I see too much information on a social media platform or even on a website where I'm going to seek information, if it's too much, information overload, shut down, nothing happens. Also, the lifespan of a social media post in particular is so short. It gets wiped away. I think last year, Instagram's lifespan for a post was something like 3 hours max for like your inner circle. It was something ridiculous like that. Now, don't get me wrong. Everybody's algorithm will work a little bit differently, but at its peak, it's like 3 hours and then it's gone. Yeah. So if we spend so much time fixated on pumping everything into one space or worried about being repetitive when that last one's already gone to 2020. Like it's gone. Say it again. That was right. Right. Say it again. Do the thing. So I love that repetition. The other thing that I wanted to mention that you really spurred in my brain was, and I think you can speak to this, not just the repetition to get the message itself across, but the repetition from that foundational place of being recognizable. You mentioned that, recognizable. If somebody sees a post, even if your face isn't on it, your logo isn't on it, they know by the vibe and the message you're actually displaying to the world. That consistency allows them to know, oh yeah, no, that's absolutely Kristen's post. They just know.
Yeah, there's some really great stuff you shared in there. So it's interesting. We work with a lot of executives and subject matter experts, technical folks. And so, as you can imagine, we see a lot of that concern of accuracy, precision, all the details. I'm a big context person myself. So I have a lot of empathy for folks who are like, but you didn't include this nuance and this nuance. And what about this? And what about this? And as you said, part of what we do is it's interesting because kind of thinking about one main idea, whether that's a lot of our work starts with long form content. So kind of editorial, like bylines, blog posts, and then we are able to work from there in creating content. Most of our work, again, with the base we serve is on LinkedIn. And so by taking what actually is repetitive in a not good way is sharing every single thing you know every single time. When you break it down, focus on different angles, different approaches. What about this? What about that? Nuance, but you're still kind of circling the same core ideas and core messages. That's, I think, such a nice balance of bringing that variety, but still sort of beating that drum of consistency. These are the things that I want to talk about. So by kind of taking, I mean, if you think about like an old school, like SEO pillar post strategy, right? Same idea. It's like, things branching off, there's 100 different angles you could talk about. And we can take all those angles over time, but just not all at once in every single piece of content. So interestingly, the thing of kind of one idea at a time helps find that balance between being repetitive and recognizable, as you said.
Yeah. And with the through line of the consistent brand voice, you tie everything together. Yep. Now, of course, there's the added element of strategy, which you can do to kind of literally tie things together, but that's a conversation for another day. I'm curious now, because I did mention also about how a confused mind doesn't buy. I mentioned about how if there's too much information, they power down, they take no action. This is an important part of your messaging as well. And I'd like you to share with everyone the connection, the tie between your messaging, making the messaging do the heavy lifting with its clarity, etc., in driving action.
Think about that a little bit. I want to make sure I'm really answering your question. So I think that, again, kind of going back to the beauty of messaging as your foundation is like, you have to do that really, really hard work once. And then you should be saying it the same way. When you've nailed down that one phrase, that one statement that really encapsulates what you do or your unique value or what problem you're solving, you don't need to keep reinventing the wheel a bunch of times. I would say in building the messaging, so for core messaging, you really want to focus on the customer, but their actual language. I myself just went through this. I got some wonderful feedback, not all positive feedback, but some great feedback from a client of ours. And it validated some things I'd been thinking about. It confirmed that something I'd been struggling with wasn't landing on the kind of prospect side. And I went and took, everyone now has a meeting, a meeting note taker, like that actual transcript, and said, let's take these words and build them in. Obviously, if you've got your own brand identity forged, there's a little bit of synthesis there. There's some, thinking thoughtfully, but really listening closely to customers. That's a little bit different kind of sidebar from our approach at Every Little Word to thought leadership, which has a lot to do with bubbling up from the individual expert contributor. But when you think about that foundational messaging, you really do want to be leaning into the customers who are ideal. Certainly not everybody's opinion is equally valuable, but the folks who you love and would want to be working with, whatever they have to say about your product, service, offers, sales process, all of that stuff's incredibly valuable.
100%. I mean, I love how you danced around that scary word, market research. Whenever I bring this up, people go, ooh, that sounds like work. Yeah, it's a job. You run a business.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's me just speaking the hard truth. But when you look at it from the point of view of, like you just described, this can be made really easy. You have a call with clients, with prospects, you have a note taker, you have transcripts.
Yep.
Feed that thing into some AI tool that you've primed and conditioned, so you're not just like throwing it into the ether. Remember, we're doing this wisely, and get some feedback. Figure it out. Like do a little bit of that work to make sure that your messaging is in alignment. And regarding, you said answering the real question there, and I think you did a phenomenal job, by the way, to clarify a little bit more about bringing that foundational work, which is integral, into your forward-facing documents, deliverables, etc. I'm kind of talking about the differentiation between content and copywriting. Because content, see, now I love this space. This is where I started like a decade ago, and it's this umbrella that is content. Yeah. Content is anything that's consumed by an audience. Anything. Copywriting is a form of content. Awesome. However, copywriting really is intended for people to take action. It is words that make people take action. Now, I'm going to expand that to be not just words, but also symbols and media that gets people to take action, because you've got a lot of different tools at our disposal today. It's just reality. And there's a saying, I'm trying to remember it now. All copy is content, but not all content is copy.
Yes, that sounds right.
Right. So this is where my brain gymnastics kicks in. I start truly overthinking, but also just like philosophizing about this and how we approach. How do we take that foundational messaging, which we have very much intentionally designed through this market research, etc., to be action oriented, to appeal to our audience, to really drive that message home, especially in like the closing parts of whatever we're articulating into the world. And how do we let that bleed into everything to turn your content into copywriting? Does that make sense? What I just articulated?
Yeah, I think so. I could probably talk with you about content versus copy and where we draw different distinctions all day. But what I would say is, first, to some extent that should be baked in the sense of the messaging should be compelling. Right. It should really resonate deeply with prospects so that when you encourage the next subsequent action, they've already been drawn in. So the messaging itself needs to kind of compel them. And that's why we talked about, obviously, like leaning into their words about their problems, their challenges, your solutions. From there, I think it does have to do a lot with like a good understanding of the platform and the channel and of course what you're trying to achieve and not just what you're trying to achieve in a vacuum, but what actually makes sense for what you're trying to achieve, which may not be a single LinkedIn post and I'm going to sell a 6-figure engagement, right? So what is the action that's really calibrated to what platform you're on, what kind of content you're presenting, right? Is it more educational? Is it more action oriented? And then do you have some of these other best practices? Like, is there something around urgency that you're able to incorporate organically, ethically, that it's real and true? I'm a big fan of that. I'm not a fan of manufactured urgency, but if there is something in the way you've structured an offer that has a time sensitivity or speaks to a time sensitivity for your prospect, like that's something you can incorporate. And I think, I am a firm believer that strategy like lives in the weeds as well. So really understanding the platforms that you're on. I remember this is years ago. And again, we do most of our work on LinkedIn, but like being in conversation with someone where it was like the difference between Instagram and LinkedIn maybe. And like one put the caption on top of the photo and one put the photo on top of the caption. And so when it would say like something below or something above, like the copy didn't translate well. It's just like those little things matter because they introduce just a little bit of friction into the process. And you don't want friction unintentionally, right? Like sometimes you want to introduce friction and that's fine, but you don't want accidental friction in the process. So I think having those folks you're partnering with who are in the weeds, understanding those tiny ins and outs of the platform and the specific channel you're on can really make a big difference.
That leads beautifully into what was on my mind next, which is
awesome.
When do we kind of switch gears from DIY to actually hiring out, because there are a lot of people who I've spoken to day to day who are doing great jobs. They're really, really doing the best of their ability, and they still need to serve their clients, right? They're wearing so many hats that it's really important right now for them to switch gears and focus their attention on one thing rather than another. But budget can be a huge constraint in that situation. So let's talk just briefly about what does it look like when you're in that decision space about when to outsource, what to outsource, how to outsource, especially if you're on a budget. Where do we start?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I will say, I am a small business owner, so I have very limited budget with things that I do as well. So this is always a consideration that we have. And I also work with mid-sized companies and I work with enterprise companies, and they have budget constraints too. They look different, but this is no matter how big your organization is, you've got to think about what you can allocate. And so I think there's a couple of things I would say. So first, this is a little more like philosophical, entrepreneurial, is I like to think about budget in two ways and then try to reconcile them. So first is like, how much money do I think I have, right? And a lot of times people have, when they say no budget, they kind of mean no budget, as in they don't have any money earmarked and set aside. And to be honest, like only maybe 2 years ago did I start actually allocating a specific marketing budget versus just kind of saying like, can we go for it? Should we spend on it? So I think allocating a specific budget for yourself puts you in a better position about spending decisions. And obviously you need to make sure that budget makes sense for the financial health of your org. Ideally, you have ways to kind of toggle it up and down throughout the year if things are going better than expected or worse than expected. But I do think having a budget is really helpful. So that's kind of internal, right? Based on your own company. And then the other piece of that though is like understanding what it costs in the market. And I've had situations where I've said to folks, you are totally worth it, and I cannot afford you at this time. I have to go with a different solution. And I know I'm intentionally choosing a maybe lesser solution, and I have to be okay with that. But I do think you have to bring in some reality, especially if you've never spent money on marketing, of what does something cost in this space. Now, in marketing, it can be quite challenging, of course, because it can cost you everything from literally $10 to $100,000 for similar comparable. So when you have limited budget, I would really think about some of that core messaging, getting help there, because that is such a strong foundation for you. And then I would look at the kind of capabilities across your organization and say, what do we feel we can kind of confidently manage on our own? We haven't said the word AI yet in this podcast. Obviously, a lot of people are using those kind of tools. There are automations, there's a lot of software, there are a lot of things that you can do to handle, especially more of the administrative work. But that core foundation, you're going to want to probably invest in, because that's likely not a skill set you have on your team. There aren't a lot of kind of messaging specialists running around in-house, right? Because it is more project-based work. So that's an area I would probably really focus on. And then, from there, I would say getting help with the strategy. So sometimes bringing someone in to help you say, well, where should I be focusing? If you have limited budget, you're going to want to focus on fewer channels probably, so that you can do fewer things well. And you may need guidance as to how to do that most effectively. And maybe that person's not helping you with the full-on execution, but they can really build you out the strategy and the execution plan that's going to set you up for success.
I am just, I wish I had like some confetti. that's the thing that I've got right now. Confetti. When I first started this podcast, like season 1, I used to have like I think I used something like a sticky note on a pencil, and it was my flag, and I would wave the flag.
Nice.
But now I feel like confetti is the thing. Just poof. That's what you needed to hear, people. I just feel like that's the vibe. Because honestly, as you were describing about the messaging and the different very executive level decisions, this is really, really key part of all that I wind up supporting a lot of my clients with, is that CEO mindset, that really stepping into the fact that you're the boss. I cannot tell you, even just at the time of this recording, it's Wednesday, right? This week, I have had no less than 2 people ask me, their bosses, remember, they are the CEO of their business, okay? Can I do that? You're the boss.
Yeah.
You can have casual Fridays on a Tuesday, friend. You do what you want. And
Mhm.
it's beautiful. And that's that CEO mindset that you have to really step into in order to make those budget decisions, in order to allocate funds accordingly, and choose whether you are in a position where you can do that, or where you're kind of just in the point where I need to invest. This is just where I'm at. And that's okay too, because remember, ROI is a thing. So you need to figure out what is the ROI for whatever I'm doing, and remembering that your investment is not just financial, and neither is your return. It's not just financial. So I'll leave that there. But the second part that I loved was when you were talking about messaging, my first thought went to, okay, next, yeah, messaging 100%, because that bleeds into everything. And I'm sitting here internally nodding like a bobblehead and thinking, yes, yes, yes. And then I thought, and the strategy, it's got to be the strategy, because I'm brainstorming back here in my crazy brain. And as soon as you started talking about strategy, I could have danced. I could have danced, because that is,
I wish you had.
I mean, I don't know. I kind of did at one point in time when I was throwing confetti. I feel like I need a beat, but it's just that framework. If you have the messaging down pat, if you have the strategy and the frameworks, the systems and processes set there, this is what you do based on, and keeping in mind, in my opinion, and I believe, Kristen, you're on the same page as me, is that these systems, these processes, the strategy is based on your unique reality. It's not just a one size fits all, here, do this. That will never fly long term. So this is a customized strategy. Once this is all done and you are holding this beautiful orb of power in your hand, you could feasibly do it yourself. You could. It'll take time, it'll take energy, so it will have a cost attached to it. But you're right, I think that is really that first step in investing your time, energy, and money into making sure that your business is thriving, making sure that you've got leads coming in the door, you're showing up, people know you even exist.
I love what you said. And I think one thing I would just reinforce around the strategy, which comes back to the first part of our conversation around consistency, is strategy is not just what are we going to do, but it is also how are we going to do it. And a lot of times the tactical, again, to talk about being back in the weeds, is where kind of the magic happens.
Yeah.
Tactical is derided as like, that's not your strategy. Well, actually, it also is. It's a both and, because if you have a great, here are the themes, here are the topics, here are the channels we want to be on, the kinds of content, and you hand that off to a team that has no idea how to put together an actual program, not create posts, but work content programs, how to get the most from an expert contribution, what kind of tools, we use things like fancy terms like tech stack, where are they going to create their graphics, for social? How often are they going to publish? Who is going to handle that? All of those pieces are what make the strategy actually come to life. And so I think it's really important that if, a lot of our work at Every Little Word does transition from strategy through to execution. So we lead those programs for people and for companies. But when that's not the case, you want to, we do some kind of content operations advisory work to say, like, here is also the process, how you should do this, how much time you need to get something done, how far in advance you need to be thinking about it. Where are you putting everything? Who's supposed to approve it? All of those questions are the small things that don't seem strategic, but at the end of the day will be the blockers that prevent you from being consistent in the way that you'd like.
Yes. And it's this level. Okay. So I have to put a stopper on me, because I'll tell you, we could talk about this all day. The systems and processes behind what it is to market, there's a whole thing. You've got your project manager. Sure, that's great. Like, I'm just imagining big system. Usually for solopreneurs, micro business owners, and even some small business owners, you don't have necessarily one project manager. But in bigger organizations, let's imagine for a moment, you have one project manager. That's great. That's fine and dandy for the business. But in reality, that marketing coordinator, that lead in marketing, is also a project manager. They are keeping tabs on so many moving pieces. Who's doing what, when's the due date, when's this, all these things that you've described, the tech stack, everything. That lead is doing that. And that's the type of work that you do at Every Little Word. That's the type of work that I do in my business. This is stuff that, let's be real, most entrepreneurs don't wanna. I hear that all the I don't wanna. And I get it. It's okay. It's not for everyone, but that's also something to consider when you're looking at the ROI, right? This is time and energy.
Yep.
Now, I'm going to get off of that whole soapbox because, like I said, we could literally talk about that all day. I know it. And everybody else who's joined us today is like, yeah, you could. Shut up, Shauna. So I need to ask you one big question. What is one thing that you can share with us today, right? Well, not right now, in about like 20 seconds, that everyone who's joined us today can take hold, carry with them, and take action on this week. In fact, today would be perfect. This gold nugget. I want to give you a chance to think about that because as you know, we've talked about so many things already. Think about that one thing for a moment, and I'm going to give you the stage after I tell everybody else that this type of conversation happens every single week. This richness of content, action-oriented tips, tricks, tools, and companionship. This happens every single week. And I want you to join us again. So hit the bell, leave a comment, ask a question, share it with your friends, and do a little dance. Maybe bring some confetti next time, and we'll have a good time. With that, I'll get off my soapbox, and I want to ask Kristen, please tell the people what they need to hear.
All right. So what I would say is consistency is not just about your cadence, although that is important. It is also about consistency in your ideas. So one thing you can do today, if you do not have an actual document somewhere, a repository that has your company's messaging, start a Google Doc that is called messaging and write down some of the key ideas that you're using, that you find yourself using in conversations, in sales pitches, in your LinkedIn posts, things that are resonating, right? So maybe you're going to work backwards a little bit and we're going to say what's already out there across all of the channels. We're going to start to condense it and use that as the foundation to start to evaluate, are these the messages I really want to be putting out there? But start by getting it in one place so that you can look at it is an underrated piece of the process. So you could do that today.
That is a great plan because all of these sticky notes is not your messaging. Okay, friend. No, that is beautiful. And I also want to ask you to please tell the people where they can learn more about you and about your view on consistency.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me associated with my company, Every Little Word. So there's a QR code here right now. You can also find us at everylittleword.co. That's everylittleword.co. And you can also, you're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm there quite often. And I also host my own podcast called Expertly Said, which is available wherever you get podcasts.
Beautiful. My goodness. Thank you so much. This has been an absolutely wonderful conversation. And I just want to leave this QR code here for a moment because I want to let you know something that actually Kristen didn't share is that this QR code and the link in the show notes leads you to an amazing blog that really articulates the fundamentals of what it means to show up with consistency beyond cadence. So this is a really important space to occupy, to feed your brain with so that you can create the necessary mindset shifts and then the tactical, practical action shifts necessary to really create a system that's going to hold you, scaffold you as your business grows. So I left that there so you guys could definitely take action on that because I read it. I love it. I'm sitting here like heart. So do it. Shauna says so. And with that, I want to remind you all that these conversations are integral for not only your business growth, but your personal growth as well. And I am open to having these conversations with you directly. So if you would like to broach the conversation, what does it look like to fill in the blank from any of these podcasts, please reach out. You can find me at my website at shaunalee.com. It's located in the show notes as well. And I'm always up for giving resources, tips, tools, and strategies, as well as introductions to cool people like Kristen so that you can actually get the job done. With that, I hope you have a fabulous rest of the day. We will indeed chat soon. See you later.